Up next, an interview with astronaut Mike Foale, who recently returned from the International Space Station.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
If the truth were known, we really delayed this launch so we could get the burritos on time.
I figured that. The flight director says get back in.
We lost the flight plan out the window.
On all three networks, you replaced all the kiddie cartoons.
Houston, we've had a problem.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I was rolling on the moon one day.
Counter, go and throttle up. Go and throttle up.
The Earth from here is a grand oasis of the big vastness of space.
You're listening to The Space Program, NASA's past, present, and future.
An interview with astronaut Mike Foale. This is Rich Kirshner reporting. Astronaut Mike Foale was born on January the 6th of 1957 in Louth, England, but considers Cambridge, England to be his hometown. Married to the former Rhonda Butler of Louisville, Kentucky, they have 2 children. He enjoys many outdoor activities, particularly windsurfing. Private flying, soaring, and project scuba diving have always been his other major sporting interests. He also enjoys exploring physics and writing children's software. Mike graduated from King's School in Canterbury in 1975. He attended the University of Cambridge, Queen's College, receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree in Physics, Natural Sciences Tripos with first-class honors in 1978. While at Queen's College, he completed his doctorate in laboratory astrophysics at Cambridge University in 1982. While a postgraduate at Cambridge University, Foale participated in the organization and execution of scientific scuba diving projects. Pursuing a career in the U.S. space program, Foale moved to Houston, Texas to work on the space shuttle navigation problems at McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Corporation. In June of 1983, Foale joined NASA's Johnson Space Center in the Payload Operations area of the Mission Operations Directorate. In his capacity as payload officer in the Mission Control Center, he was responsible for payload operations on Space Shuttle missions STS-51G, 51I, 61B, and 61C. Mike Foale was then selected as an astronaut candidate by NASA in June of 1987. Before his first flight, he flew the Shuttle Avionics Integration Laboratory simulator to provide verification and testing of the shuttle flight hardware. Before his first flight, he flew the Shuttle Avionics Integration Laboratory simulator to provide verification and testing of the shuttle flight software, and later developed crew rescue and integrated operations for the International Space Station Alpha. In preparation for a long-duration flight on the Russian space station Mir, Foale trained at the Cosmonaut Training Center at Star City, Russia. Foale also served as chief of the Astronaut Office Expedition Corps and as assistant director technical of the Johnson Space Center. He served as a mission specialist on STS-45, 56, 63, and 103, was flight engineer 2 on Mir 23 and 24, and served as the Expedition 8 commander on the International Space Station. A veteran of 6 spaceflights, Foale has logged over 374 days in space, including 4 spacewalks totaling 22 hours and 44 minutes. Foale currently holds the U.S. record for time spent in space. On his last flight from October 18, 2003 to April 29, 2004, Foale served as the Expedition 8 commander. The Expedition 8 crew launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan aboard Soyuz TMA-3 and docked with the ISS on October 20th of 2003. His 6-month tour of duty aboard the International Space Station included one 3-hour and 55-minute EVA, or extravehicular activity. The mission duration was 194 days, 18 hours, and 35 minutes, and, at its conclusion, Foale became the U.S. record holder for most cumulative time in space, having logged 374 days, 11 hours, and 19 minutes in space.
You're listening to The Space Program.
We're joined by astronaut Mike Foale, who recently returned from the International Space Station. Mike, how are you feeling after 6 months in space?
Well, Rich, I'm feeling pretty good. This time, after this 6-month period in space, floating with one other person as company, I managed to maintain a lot of my strength, so my muscles basically don't feel sore. I have a little bit of an ache in my back when I try to sit, especially when I'm standing, because there are little torsional muscles, side muscles, that I didn't get to exercise on the exercise machines on the space station. And those are still steadily coming back up to the normal level of strength. I'm able to run, I'm able to swim fast, I'm able to windsurf, and basically just enjoy being back on Earth, enjoying feeling the fresh air, enjoying feeling the rain on my face.
Oh, that's wonderful.
On my face. So I've been enjoying myself very much since I've been back, and I feel like sometimes I wonder if I ever went.
Well, I suppose it's the subtle things in life that you miss when you don't have them.
That's correct, and certainly there's a lot of very special things you get to experience when you're on board the International Space Station. But what you don't experience are just those smells of fresh coffee, wind, the noise of wind in trees, the smell of dirt and flowers, and all that's pretty. And actually, I have to tell you this, and the smell of ladies' perfume. All these things you kind of miss when you're in space, and then when you come back, I should tell you, we landed in the middle of Kazakhstan. This is a huge grassy plain, very, very early in the morning, where almost no one lives, just a few wild ponies. And we land, crash on our backs, in our couches, with a parachute softening the descent of the capsule, the Soyuz capsule. When they opened up the hatch and the air wafted in, it was an amazing smell of earth and flowers and plants. As I pulled myself up out of the capsule and then into the fresh air, I felt this faint breeze, and that was the first breeze of moving air on my face. And then as I was moved across to the couches, because we're pretty weak after being 6 months in space, we put on 170 pounds from 0 pounds. Then seeing all these people around me, I was just so unused to having people around me, and I could smell the aftershave, I could smell the nurse's perfume as she mopped my brow, I could smell the tea they brought me. There's a lot of impressions.
I can imagine. You flew in space 6 times and hold the record for all-time cumulative time in space for an American astronaut. It must be difficult to get things in order with family and all. How do you prepare for your flights?
Well, because I have been so fortunate to fly 6 times, and this was my second long-duration flight, my family are very, very used to the sequence, to the order of things. It's maybe not good, but it's a fact that my children do adapt to the fact that I'm gone a large part of the time. When I was training for this flight, I was gone up to 9 months of the previous year out of the year. So they know that Daddy goes away a lot. They also know that Daddy comes back. And when we see each other, I really spend an enormous amount of time at home with the children, playing with them. So I try and compensate for my being gone by spending more time with the children when I'm back. And NASA, to a general extent, allows me to do that, although there's always the threat of being given a high-powered job on the ground after flight in space. The other thing I do when I'm not with the family, but I'm on the space station, is I use email. My daughter Jenna, who's 12, would send me little videos that she would make, and I would send her little videos, AVI files that I would make. I'd send her little messages. She'd play act some things, and I get the audio from her. I would send emails. They would send emails to me. I'd talk on the telephone almost every day. We have a telephone on the space station. We didn't have that on the Mir. The telephone doesn't work continuously. It works only when the satellites are in line of sight to our antennas on the station. And that means that we could speak sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes only for 5 minutes. But I would get to speak most often with my wife, but other times with my children, probably once every day, every other day during the flight. So this time round, I felt I was much more in touch with my family than the previous times.
Well, we're joined by astronaut Mike Foale. A few months ago, you returned from the International Space Station. Your crewmate was Russian cosmonaut Sasha Kaleri. How easy was it to communicate with him, and how did you learn to speak Russian, as you seem to speak it very well?
I do speak Russian well now. I never had any language skills before I became an astronaut. And for my first 3 flights on the space shuttle, I never needed to speak another language. When I was assigned to fly on the space station Mir in 1995, my family and I moved to Russia for a year and a half. And there I was given a very, very concentrated language course by the Russians, where I would sit in a room and they would have an instructor, a professor, who would speak only Russian to me. We never used an English word in these classes, and it would be 8 hours a day. And that lasted for 3 months. After the 3 months period, and then I would go home and I'd speak English with my family in our apartment in Russia. After 3 months, I spoke enough Russian to start taking their lectures in Russian on the spacecraft systems, on the Soyuz system. And so steadily my Russian grew. By the time we flew this flight, I had been studying Russian for basically 8 years. Already had worked as a manager in Russia, negotiating with the Russians before this flight, and worked as an interpreter for my senior NASA bosses, as well as a technical advisor. So by the time I got to this flight, as the commander of the International Space Station, it was much more natural for me to use Russian to talk to Sasha Kaleri than it was for Sasha to try and speak English with me, although his English really isn't so bad.
You really put on some great shows from space and kept the public very well informed, if not entertained, during Expedition 8. I was most impressed by your use of the magnets. Could you briefly explain how they work on orbit with respect to each other and the Earth's magnetic pole?
Magnets really are fun to use in space around the Earth. The Earth does have a magnetic field, and we all know that a compass will point towards north, which is somewhere, I think, by Hudson Bay, is the North Magnetic Pole in northern Canada. And in fact, the field lines of the Earth are these big kind of horseshoe shapes that go from the North Pole all the way around out as big ears sticking out from the Earth to the South Pole. They're imaginary lines of force. When we are in orbit around the Earth, on board the International Space Station in free fall, if we float a magnet, it will try and align itself up with those kind of earlobe-shaped field lines coming out of the Earth's north and south poles, and point or seek the North Pole wherever we might be out in space away from the Earth. That means that it doesn't just point in a horizontal sense on the Earth's surface towards the North Pole. It points in a three-dimensional sense towards it. It actually points down. If we are coming up over Canada, the magnet orients itself pointing down towards the Earth's surface. If we are coming up over over Antarctica, the magnet points up, away from the Earth, floating in space. The other thing I did with these magnets, and of course, because with it floating in space, the magnet doesn't just point stably, it wobbles, and it continues to wobble because there's no resistance stopping it wobble. It just wobbles back and forth about the magnetic field line. If I then take the magnet and divide it up into two, it's made up of many smaller magnets, and I then gently throw one past another, one magnet's North Pole will be initially pointing and wobbling towards the North Pole of the Earth at that point in orbit. But then as the other magnet comes into its sphere of influence, its magnetic field starts to interact much more strongly with the other partner magnet in the space station. And they then start to find each other and point to each other. But at the same time, the force of attraction causes them to start moving towards each other. And so they then start to come closer, and the angular momentum causes them to spin the way an ice skater will spin as they pull in their arms. They go faster and faster as you pull in your arms when you spin. And so these magnets start spinning faster and faster around each other, and actually when they contact each other and stick together under their mutual attraction, they then have a lot of spin, and the end result is a moving, spinning cluster of magnets. This is actually the way the solar system formed. When the solar system formed out of gas and rocky material from supernova explosions, they fell together under mutual gravitational attraction. And as they fall, they start to conserve angular momentum and do the same thing that these magnets do. They start to spin more and more, and they end up spinning in a disk, and the plane of the disk is that of the solar system.
That's just amazing. We're speaking with astronaut Mike Foale, who holds the record of all American astronauts in time and space. Mike, when you returned to Earth, landing in Russia, the Russians really put on a fantastic ceremony with costume and celebration. What do you know of this tradition, and could you tell of how you and Sasha were honored?
The Russians do have a very, very long tradition in space flight. They launched the first person into space, Yuri Gagarin, from Kazakhstan, Baikonur. And when he returned, he didn't actually land in his capsule. He ejected out of his capsule and then parachuted to the Earth, where he was then very, very quickly found and feted and taken around the cities with great acclaim. We landed in our capsule, were lifted out of our spacecraft, and we recovered over an hour or so with tea, slowly getting some of our strength back so that we could very barely walk from our helicopter to cars at the airfield. That then took us to the town hall. At the town hall, in this small remote place, part of Kazakhstan, Astana, we were then greeted by young girls in Kazakhstani costume, national dress. They were each holding bread and salt to welcome us. In Russia, you break the bread that's presented to you, and it's a big bread cake. It looks like a cake. You break it, and then dip the bread into a little bowl of salt that's in the middle of the bread. It's like a disc. It's sort of a cake with a hole in it. And then you eat the bread, and then you kiss the girls 3 times on either side of the cheek, and accept the flowers that they present to you. This is at the same time as trying not to fall over because you feel so weak, or you might feel nauseous when you move your head. At that point, we then proceeded and then did a small news conference. This time they let us sit down, which was very necessary. And then we were presented by the mayor of the town with these very fancy velvet robes, the very, very smooth velvet material, deep, deep purple color, and these huge, huge hats, also made of felt. We had to put these on, and then as we walked away from the hall, we had to go through this very normal-sized door. Actually, Kazakhstani people are a bit shorter than Americans, and so I just remember I had to, so that my hat, which is tall, wouldn't fall off. I had to duck my head down to walk through this door to get to the car that would take us to the airplane. And it was that most of my head ducking down. Again, I felt very nauseous as I ducked my head down. And so ended the arrival in Kazakhstan. Then we got on the plane, flew 3 hours to Moscow, and then at Moscow the same ceremony basically repeated itself, although this time we weren't given any national dress to wear. We came down the stairs rather unsteadily from the aircraft, taken in the bus. We saw our families then, got to kiss our families and be with our families in the bus, driving us to a quarantine hotel. And there again, there was a big band playing as we came out of the bus, only for a few minutes. And again, there were more girls from the high school, local high school, in national dress, presenting us with salt and bread and salt, which we accepted, and flowers. And then we went on into our rooms. So it was a pretty colorful and emotional experience, not only being welcomed by all these well-wishing people, but also seeing our families for the first time after 6 months.
Not to mention all the tremendous colors of the flowers.
Yes. And they smell great.
Oh, I imagine. Mike, that's a wonderful tradition. All right, I've saved the last question, and I traditionally ask this of any of our interviewees, and it's the most important of all. What's your favorite food, and what do you want for Christmas?
My favorite food, I think, is tuna salad that my wife makes. She adds little nuts and little bits of nutmeg to it, and it just tastes great. What do I want for Christmas? I think probably a new computer. Mine's very old at home at the moment.
Well, 6 months in space will make a computer old.
Yes, it will.
Mike, it's been an honor talking with you. Our best wishes to you and yours, and Godspeed in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much, and God bless you and all of your listeners.
An interview with astronaut Mike Foale. This is Rich Kirshner reporting.
From the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
This has been the Space Program, NASA's past, present, and future.